delighted to welcome today some of the players from our new sponsors, Chelsea FC, here to the Sauber factory to meet our drivers.
Oh no, it's John Terry! Quick, hide the Japanese one!
Hello, welcome to Gareth Jones on Speed, a loose aggregate of three blokes who like to stand around together in a room, drinking cider, wine and beer, and asking each other what you've been driving. Zog, I know what you've been driving. Your Porsche 944.
Yeah, although I haven't been driving it for the last couple of weeks because it's been in bits.
Well, more on that presently. Right, I want to hear, because there's a fab story about your bits.
Oh, I came up with a good trick.
Honestly,
I came up with a great trick.
If you follow Zog on Twitter, you'll know what this is. If you don't, you're in for a treat. Richard, what have you been driving?
I've been driving a few things in the past few weeks. I've been going small car crazy, mate. Really? I love a small car. I drove that VW up, which I think I mentioned on the show.
You like
a couple
it?
of episodes ago. Yeah, terrific. Yeah. It's not as joyful as my little Fiat 500, but it is in its own way.
Few things
very impressive. Yes, exactly.
I'd love
to have a go on one of those.
Me too.
I think there's some in the UK. I think they have some at Warwick University where Tata have an agreement with the engineering department there. But I think Car Magazine's website ran a picture of one in the car park there. I would love to have a go in that. Or if you're listening and you've imported a Tata Nano for some reason
from
India, please can I have a go in it? Because I'm really interested in that car. I haven't driven a Tata Nano, but I have driven belatedly the new Toyota Yaris, which is being advertised quite heavily on the TV here at the moment, so I thought I'd have a go in that, which is fine. You can tell a lot about it by its parcel shelf.
It's a good solid parcel shelf.
No, it's not.
Really?
It's very cleverly designed to be cheap and light and simple, and so...
Well, remember, we went to
that car generally.
We went to the factory where they were building the Yaris and followed the process. And it's proper made in a proper careful way. So they do a proper job.
Don't they? Yes, and I'm sure it's all very clean, everyone wears gloves.
And we've driven the Verso S, which is very similar.
Yeah, it's alright, that's fine.
We liked it.
But and I drove that Nissan Micra that's got the supercharged engine in it, which is a terrific engine with a mediocre car wrapped around it.
I like a supercharger.
Oh, we like a supercharger. Yeah. We believe in supercharger.
I'm the only person here at the moment who owns a supercharged car. You have a turbocharged car.
I do, yeah. Technically a turbo super...
Well,
actually, yes, a turbocharger is like a turbo supercharger, in fact.
Is it really?
Yes.
Yeah.
Really?
Everything. The overall concept is...
Hang on, whoa. Hang on.
A supercharger is forced induction. It's just that a regular supercharger is driven basically off the crank by some sort of pulley, whereas a turbo supercharger drives it from the exhaust, but it's usually shortened to turbocharger.
I've never
it is all supercharging in the end.
Yeah. Right, so pedantry out of the way, but yes, you are the only person with a supercharged car in this room at the moment.
No, that's not right, because Violet has a blow belly. She keeps it very quiet, but I've seen her heading down Stoke Newington High Street with goggles on, looking like
that's a great image. I love my girlfriend even more.
Mr. Toad.
I wasn't going to say
She does not look like this.
trouble you're in.
No, I wasn't. Excuse me, can I just point out there was in no way. But when you put goggles on and you're driving a Bentley, you look like Mr. Toad.
I was going to say one of those, what's his name, Birkin, one of those old Bentley boys.
My girlfriend does not wear a Merkin.
Oh Lord.
Moving swiftly on.
Go on. You haven't been driving a blower Bentley. You haven't been driving a blower Bentley.
So a little Micra with a supercharger. It's interesting because it's a tiny 3-cylinder engine.
I was going to say 3.
Normally, this trend for downsizing, and the Fiat Twin Air has a turbo on it in my 500. Ford are doing this new 3-cylinder EcoBoost engine with a turbo on it.
Aye.
Small turbos are the way forward. Superchargers, particularly on small engines, not so fashionable because there are these frictional losses involved in constantly driving the compressor and all the gubbins that's just soaking up a little bit of energy. But Nissan, I think, by going for the sort of super low friction components as much as possible, and also saying that the benefit is drivability, they can make the car, and it is very long geared, which you can't necessarily do in a turbocharged car because it means the car never gets on boost.
Yeah, that's right.
The supercharger, well, it's always on boost, so you can long gear it, which actually is beneficial to economy, and it did seem to be pretty economical, and it was a really nice engine.
It's not an electric supercharger, it's sort of crank driven, isn't it?
Old-fashioned pulley style. I found out this weekend as well that apparently those Micras are built in India now, but they come into the northeast of England and they go to the Nissan factory, which has just had some more good news about it's going to be building a new medium-sized car as well as a new small car. But they are also having to do a load of work. They sort of half rebuilt those Micras in the UK to bring them up to scratch, and there's a locally made dashboard goes in They throw away the old one.
No.
Yeah, when the dashboards
throw away.
Well, they chip it. They recycle it and make it to plastic chips. But
it's easier to do that than sort of shipping part-assembled cars.
Well, I said, why don't they just send it over without the dashboard?
Yeah,
but this bloke who was telling me this, who lives up there, said that it's because
it would just be too much trouble at the Indian
end of the operation.
Because
they're building the cars for other markets. That car was always meant to be the sort of world car, but particularly aimed at what they would call developing markets, where people are less fussy about soft touch dashboard and I want my sat nav, I want my reversing sensors, and I want my heated seats and stuff like that.
Talking about Scotland.
Yeah.
Very demanding car market.
Yeah,
very demanding.
Still, a lot of the time, doors are optional up there. Mind you, they are in the northeast as well. Marks you out as a softie.
Wheels in some places too.
Well, that's a different.
So, did you like your little supercharged 3-cylinder?
I like the engine.
Nissan?
I just thought the rest of the car was, it was all right. It was not bad, but a friend of mine is thinking of getting a small car. And I happened to see him when I was driving the Yaris, and he went, is this any good? And I was like, yeah, it's fine, it's Toyota, it's bound to be reliable and all the rest of it, and better. And he was like, okay, well, what about Fiesta? I was like, yeah, Fiesta's really good. No, what about Polo? Yeah, Polo's good, Polo's very good, yeah. There's a Kia garage over there. What's that, a little Kia, is a Kia Rio or something? Is that any good? And you're like, yeah, I think that's pretty good, yeah. So I suddenly realised most of the small cars around at the moment are pretty good.
Well, the point I think about small cars...
I would avoid the micro, I don't think.
The people that buy small cars like that are often mums, older people, empty nesters, that kind of people, and they're not interested in cars as younger people often are, or older blokes are. Older women want an appliance. They don't want to think about a car. They want something that is below the radar, something they don't notice, something that works. And therefore, cars like the Micra and the Yaris are so good you don't notice them. Good in terms of they won't satisfy you in the way that a Lancia with brio and involvement and breakdowns and great suspension or something like that.
But they'll start every time. They'll be cheap to fix when they do go wrong. Your regular servicing is cheap.
You won't even notice it. So it's actually, therefore, a much better car than we would ever give it credit for.
If you went into a Nissan garage and you test drove that Micra and nothing else, you'd go, well, this is fine. This is delightful. It's a ridiculous cliche about cars like that. It's very easy to drive.
Yeah.
I can't remember the last car I drove that was hard to drive. Probably like a Ford RS200 or something, and I wouldn't recommend my godmother got one of those.
Probably that one that had the pedals on the back seat.
Yeah, it's just, but they are particularly, all the controls are very light, and that's where I thought the Micra let itself down. There's a sort of sense of looseness to it. Not that things aren't screwed together properly, but just that there's massive tolerances and it's all done a little bit on the cheap. There's not quite the sort of bushing and damping and things that there would be on a Polo or even a Fiesta. It just feels a little bit threadbare. But if you didn't drive anything else, you would find it perfectly okay. Because we're into cars, we would go around and check out
We'd moan about a few little things here and there.
You'd find that actually
in terms of it being
alternatives if you like driving cars.
And you've been driving a young person's small car, haven't you? You've been driving a Suzuki? I mean, that's not a car for an older person.
The Swift Sport was the one I really wanted to talk about, because I had the old Swift Sport, which was a terrific car in so many ways, really good fun to drive. And I almost bought it. It was a long-term test car, so I had it for a year, but it wasn't mine. It went back. I asked Suzuki how much they'd want for it. I seriously considered buying it. There were a few things that put me off. One of them being it was supposed to be run on 98-octane fuel, which gets expensive, and it was incredibly thirsty for a small car because it was very revvy, very short-geared, and it was seemed to be doing sort of around 30 and sometimes a bit less, which for a little car is a bit worrying.
That is quite thirsty.
Yeah, it is.
Yeah,
it's
not a heavy car. Where's it going?
I know, it was weird. So
but not
otherwise,
the new car.
Overall, I absolutely adored it. But the new one, it's like they've gone through it, and so many of the beefs, big or small, that I had with the old one, they've fixed. I mean, stupid stuff. I had keyless go on the old one, but the key was about the size of when mobile phones start to get really small. It sort of felt, I'm exaggerating slightly, but only slightly. It was too big. It made your trousers feel bulky and falling down. And it's a shame, because also with keyless go, you never take the key out of your pocket, and it was sort of constantly in this, what the bloody hell, I didn't know. So the new one, the key's tiny. I didn't like the fact you had to run it on Porsche petrol, because it's basically a homologation rally engine, and it's got oil spray on the underside of the pistons and all these techie things, which is lovely, and a really hot cam on it and all this. They fiddle with the engine. It's the same engine, but it can now run happily on 95 juice. Great. From being freakishly thirsty for a small car, it is now freakishly economical for a car that you thrape the life out of the whole time. It wouldn't do less than 40. It was regularly doing into the sort of mid to high 40s, and it was just, I was like, well, how is it?
And you were still driving like a maniac.
I was driving like a total loony for a lot of time, within applicable speed limits. But it's a revvy car. The power doesn't come in till top end of the 6,000s of the rev range is the peak power. So you're constantly
it's
in the torques up
sports
there
car.
as well. Well, it is.
Which model was this? What is it called? Is there a sport model, or is this just the basic?
It's called
Swift?
the Suzuki Swift Sport.
Right.
No, the basic Swift is a very nice little car.
Yeah.
This is the sports model, the GTI, if you will. It's just not called that. It looks nice. It's slightly understated. If you know what it is, you look at it and you go, the sport, not the normal one. Slight detail differences, bigger wheels, blacked in front end.
Yeah,
but that's the spirit of the hot hatchback.
Big blue lights. And
this is the thing.
Did you like it more than your Fiat 500, which I know you really like?
Well, do you know what? Honestly, if it was just up to me, I would. I started thinking, oh damn. The one thing about this Swift Sport is that it's genuinely a car that's fit for purpose. You wouldn't criticise a supercar for having poor boot space. That's not the point of it.
Yeah.
You wouldn't criticise a Range Rover for not being able to go around the Nürburgring in 7.5 minutes. That's not the point of it.
Yeah.
A hot hatchback of that size has to do certain things, and within that I have never driven in a long time such a complete car, a car that is absolutely perfectly fit for purpose. It's now got a 6-speed box in it, again curing a complaint about the old one, bit buzzy on the motorway. New one isn't, can cruise fine, and it's doing it economically. I think it looks really nice. I think the seat on the old one was a little bit high. The seat now goes down low enough for me. The wheel, unusually for a small car, doesn't just move up and down. It has an innie-outie wheel, so you can get the proper touring car wheel close in feeling. The interior is not super high quality, but again, it's a 13.5 grand car. Now that's pretty much what I paid for my Fiat, and all things being equal, there was a pang of regret. There's one reason I have my Fiat is it's easy to insure for my wife, who doesn't have a great deal of driving history in the UK because she's from abroad. But actually the Swift is 19A on the new insurance groupings, which go up to 50, so it's not terrible. I mean, I would seriously in the future look into what it would cost to run it as opposed to the Fiat. I haven't had so much fun in a car, since I borrowed a Mercedes SLS a few weeks ago. But that was different fun. And actually, the point about Suzuki is you can use all of it. The Mercedes, there was a sense that actually the satisfying part from that was how Mercedes-ish it was. Automatic gearbox, slurring along, lovely. But you couldn't use all the power anywhere. You would get arrested or die.
Yes.
The Suzuki, you could use every ounce of it, and that was part of the satisfaction of it. It was just lovely, revving it, running up and down the gearbox, great brakes, everything. The weight of the clutch pedal, it's an underrated thing, but it just makes the whole driving experience where you just nicking gear changes in super fast.
And in what way...
I'm sold. I'm sold on this.
In what way was it better than a Mini?
Well, actually, the Minis, they grow us because they're great handling cars and all those bloody-bloody-blah. But I actually feel a bit leaden compared to that Suzuki. I just think it was much livelier, the engine way more revvy, and it has that sort of squat, planted to the road feeling that the Mini does, but even more so where the track feels almost as wide as the wheelbase is long, so you just got that sort of 4 square on the road thing. Yep. And it still does what the old one does, which is, if you really sort of pile it into a corner, it sort of 4-wheel drifts slightly, like an old Mini would, in fact, not a new Mini. The new Mini, you struggle to get one of those to do it, but this, and it doesn't feel like you're out of control, it just feels like the suspension, the tyres, everything is working in harmony, but in a way where you can feel movement, you can feel life in the chassis. It's not just getting around the corner in the sort of grippy, efficient way. It's got a soul to it. It's a wonderful little car. For 13.5 grand, I can't recommend it highly enough. I wish I'd bought one.
Yeah. So am I right in saying you like that car?
Yeah, that's right. I bloody loved it.
And finally, the results from this weekend's DTM opening round. In first place, the British driver Gary Pafford. In second place, the British driver Jamie Green. In third place, Matthias Ekstrom. Fourth place, Christian Vettoris. Fifth place, Mike Rockenfeller. Sixth place, Andy There was no sixth place. In seventh, Ralf Schumacher. These results are trivial.
Central with Gareth Jones on speed.
Do you know what I've noticed recently? You see an extraordinary number of Lexus CT200s on the motorway and Range Rover Evokes in North Wales. It's almost certainly the single most popular car in North Wales, this side of...
Does this reflect where you've been spending your time recently?
I wonder if it does,
I'm wondering if this is... I'm just saying it's maybe a skewed sample.
They found a new seam of gold up there or something. The Evokes are really expensive.
Yeah, like we saw loads of them. Ridiculous numbers.
Sure? Are they not? I know Land Rover test cars up there. Yeah. They're not all gaffered up, are they?
No.
Gauges
these are...
I've been selling pretty well because I've certainly met a couple of people who've...
massive waiting time on them.
Yeah.
And there were delays in production because of two things. If you spec'd the big full-length sunroof, which I think most people do, they couldn't get those off the supplier fast enough. Or the xenon lights, I think. But I heard about a bloke who had one of the first Evoques, and he was very pleased about this, that he got in there early, he got an Evoque, and he got the full-length sunroof. He'd only had it a matter of weeks when the builders who were doing some work on the outside of his house dropped a hammer off the scaffolding and it went straight through the glass roof. Went to the dealer and went, "You've got to get me a glass roof for my Evoque." "Oh, I'm sorry, but the factory can't even get glass roofs for the Evoque. You're going to have to wait. You couldn't use his car in case it rains." So, that's what happens when even the component suppliers can't supply with demand for the car. We digress. What were you making the point about where you see? Those Lexuses. Sorry to just interrupt again.
The CT200, yeah.
That annoys me, that car, when I see them on the motorway. You're right, you do see quite a lot of them. I think that company car user-choosers are going for them because of the tax advantage. They wouldn't want a Prius because in their minds they're above that. They would normally have an Audi A4 or something like that. They can have a hybrid car with a good company car tax rating that's still a bit posh. But what annoys me about that car, if you look at those daytime running lights it has with little LEDs, there's a gap in them. Have you noticed? There's for reasons I can't quite figure. I think it might be where the indicator lives. There's a gap. But when the indicator's not on, you just see this, what should be a continuous line of light. Looks like there's a bulb out. Yeah. Irritating.
That would annoy me.
It's like me, whenever I see the Audi with those daytime running lights, those LED dotted lights, I always think of Maya from Space 1999, her eyebrows.
Her eyebrows,
eyebrows.
Yeah. Oh, it's like my colleague Jeremy Clarkson always thinks that some of those Audis look like the baddie out of Captain Scarlet, was it?
Yeah, Captain Black.
No, actually, no, it's not.
Captain Black was the agent of the
Mr. Ons. No, he wasn't. The Hood was Thunderbirds.
Was it?
You're right. No, you're right.
The Mr. Ons took over Captain Black and made him indestructible, as they did with Captain Scarlet as well.
You're right. Can I just, however, throw in the trivia that the Human League took their name from a board game based on Captain Scarlet. One of the scenarios in the board game, I think, was called The Rise and Fall of the Human League, or The Mr. Ons and the Rise and Fall of the Human League. And one of the members of Human League Mark I, Ian Craig Marsh, I think, was an obsessive collector of kind of geeky sci-fi board games, and he had this board game, and so they called the band the Human League.
Good lad. You see, there's the Hood. I used to know what Hood's birthday was. Richard's got his iPad out. Yeah, well, I used to have a TV21 calendar, and on the TV21 calendar was the Hood's birthday. So we used to celebrate the Hood's birthday, me and my mate Bobby, a long time. So I've gone off topic here, haven't I?
Yes, we have. Back to the...
So, you see a lot of CT200s, you see a lot of Evoques, and you see a lot of Mercedes B-Class, the old B-Class, in North Wales. There seems to be lots of them around. Now, I may have had my awareness of the B-Class heightened by the fact that I spent a week driving around in a B-Class myself, but it was the new one. But you do see a lot of them because there's a lot of older people in North Wales, and again, they like the B-Class. Classics for a tall car for older people.
Yeah.
Flawed. Horribly flawed, the old B-Class. It was just...
I never drove one.
Well, I drove the A-Class, and the B-Class is just a stretched A-Class. And you get in the A-Class, and the first thing you do is bang your forehead.
Really?
Well, because
I drove the A-Class. I remember thinking that the outgoing A-Class was actually all right, but that's because it was compared to the old A-Class.
Sorry, I'm thinking of the first generation A-Class. But because of that sandwich floor and the rake of the windscreen, it just puts you a bit too close to the windscreen, and it was there, right in your face, rubbish. But the new B-Class, which I've driven, is a completely different animal. They've started again. They threw away the whole sandwich floor idea and started from scratch. And what Mercedes are now building is their Golf. It's a front-wheel drive hatch. It's built in Hungary as well, which I didn't realise. Did you know that Mercedes built the cars, the B-Class and the A-Class in Hungary? But the car I had was the B200 Blue Efficiency Sport, 1.8 litre diesel engine, 4-cylinder. What was the power output again? I can't even remember. I'm looking at the sheet.
4 million. 8.
Somewhere between 7 and 4 million. Hang on, I'll tell you now.
Shall we get? I reckon
136.
Is it?
Yeah, but the torque, 300 torques.
Of what? Which unit of
Is that
torque?
Newton meters or foot pounds?
Newton meters.
No, it's pound foot. Is a foot pounds is a measure of kinetic energy of bullets.
And
is it?
Yeah.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Anyway.
Yeah, I chose this car for a very good reason, because the week that we went up to North Wales, it was mooted that there could be a fuel transport strike, and so I organised.
So you immediately went out, bought a lot of jerry cans, filled them all up, and stored them near a naked flame,
and said, "Aren't the Tory government great?" Yeah. So I chose a car that was genuinely thrifty, just in case when we got to North Wales there was no fuel to be had.
Can I just say that's boringly sensible?
Yeah, really thank you. So we could come back to London on.
I mean, I'm not saying it wasn't sensible, but it's just
boringly sensible. That car gave us an average of 44 miles to the gallon for a big 5-seater hatchback, which is pretty darn good, I think, considering...
It was fully loaded most of the time.
It certainly was, and it was driven like the proverbial bat out of hell, because we managed to time our trip where traffic was going the opposite way. We're like on a reverse commute. And I drove it too fast, really, proper too fast. And I got a tremendous mileage out of it. They say that its potential is something like 65 miles to the gallon, and I do not doubt for 1 minute that if you drove that car like everyone else drives on the road, you really would get that. It's probably the thriftiest car I've driven. You know, you get, 28, 35 in your Fiat 500 in town, Richard, yeah?
No, that Fiat does 39 everywhere.
39?
Everywhere.
I reckon if I drove this in town gently, I'd get 50 miles per gallon. I drove like a maniac. It was brilliant. And it was lovely. Expensive. That one that we had was the sport model. It was 29 grand, which is quite a lot of money for a big hatch. We say all cars are expensive these days. Cars are expensive these days. What, Violet Berlin?
Did you really get that much efficiency of that car?
Yeah.
But you drive like a maniac.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right, okay, this is how he did it.
He's a spirited driver.
No.
Spirited.
That's what I meant, obviously. This is how he did it. I was there. Right?
What's the name of the programme, Violet?
He drove spiritedly most of the time.
Yes.
And then I would say, look, this proves how spiritedly you are driving, because look how bad the fuel economy is. Yeah. And then Gareth would drive really, really slowly to get me back for saying his driving was spirited, and say, well, this is how you asked me to drive. But he would do that until he got his fuel economy up again, and then he would drive spiritedly again.
It's true.
So that is how it happened.
And are you saying this is a good thing or a bad thing? Or are you just observing? You're neutral. You're just describing it.
He's saying what great fuel economy and all the rest, even with him. But I can't help thinking that if he had that car on a regular basis, we wouldn't be getting that fuel economy out of it, because he would not be doing the kind of driving like his mother.
The time which I drove gently like everyone else was a very short period of time, because...
It wasn't gently, it was like we were going to a funeral.
Exactly, because that's how you have to drive to get maximum economy out of a car, and it was killing everyone in the car. I was like, Dad, come on, we've got to get there, come on, it was horrible.
We quite liked it.
No, you didn't, and you know you didn't. We liked the car, it was comfy, it had lovely brown leather seats.
We liked it. It was very sensible. We liked it for that.
It had what are they, 18-inch wheels? I forget what the wheels were. And it was probably the worst car over speed bumps of any car. And that includes the Lexus ISF and the Renault Sport that we drove. It didn't like speed bumps at all.
But we do live near Islington, which is like the home of speed lumps. Yeah.
But, and I didn't expect this from this car, it had the most neutral front to rear balance of any car I can remember driving for a long while. You put it into a turn, you set the angle of the turn, and it just sits there. It just did not need adjustment at all. It had lovely balance front to rear. I liked that. And inside it was almost Art Deco and avant-garde, I think. But the worst thing about that car, and if I was Mercedes, I would fix this straight away, it was the information screen, the dash that you've got all your... Fair play, you know, it had a DAB radio and all that. But the screen, which sits proud like a sort of an iPad on the dash, very nice, but had quite a small screen in a large surround. You know, there was a huge difference between the surround and the size of the screen, and that just made it look like a really bad Korean LCD flat panel TV. It actually made it look cheap. I know it wasn't, but it made it look cheap. You want it to look classy, you've got to make the size of the screen maximise to the surround that it's in. And if that is my biggest complaint about that car, perhaps my only complaint about that car...
Apart from the terrible ride.
Apart from the terrible ride over speed bumps,
which is unforgivable, really. I'd fix that before the screen, quite honestly.
Well, I don't know.
Why do you need to ride in a family car like that?
I'm kind of used to crashing in speed bumps, but
it's kind of like the London equivalent of the Alps.
Really? Yeah, but a lot of the time, cars with suspension are quite good over speed bumps, because what makes speed bumps difficult is if you've got a really soft, wallowy car. If you drove a 1974 Cadillac over a speed bump, it would keep moving for hours afterwards. It would probably smack its nose on the ground. One of the best cars ever over speed bumps is the Toyota Aygo, because it's incredibly light and it's actually quite stiffly sprung, and it's short. And it just hops over them. But one of the things is because the engine in the nose is really light, it doesn't drag the nose down again, the momentum of it as it goes over the speed bumps.
Can I finish this with a trick I learned? I should have done it in this B200 Sport. My mate Vinny used to drive a Mark II Golf, and he used to brake hard just before the speed bump,
and then come off the brakes just as you're about to go over the speed bump.
He would bunny hop. It would unload the suspension and bunny hop over them. I bet it works in this car ever so good. And they say, it looks a bit frumpy, the B-Class. Consider what the rivals to that car are.
What are the rivals to that car?
Why?
Renault Scenic?
Yeah, it's the Touran.
No, because the Touran's got 7 seats, so it's not really. Golf Plus.
Golf Plus is frumpy.
I'm not entirely sure what the rivals to that car are.
Well, it's not
a Golf.
There must be a Renault with
the Renault Scenic. It's almost identical in size to the Renault Scenic, apart from the fact that it's about, 8 inches lower. It's an MPV which isn't an MPV. You get out of the car and step up. You don't get out and step down. And that took a lot of getting used to. I really liked it.
That Peugeot 3008. That's a bloody awful looking car, so there you go.
Yeah, everything else looks frumpy. This, I think, in the grand scheme of things, is a bit more avant-garde, especially with the big wheels in black. Ooh, get in.
Good.
And our children weren't sick in it.
Good morning.
Good morning, sir. And can I say how magnificently beige you look today? Is that a new aftershave?
It's TCP.
How delightful.
I'm a prominent local accountant, and I'm looking for a new car.
Excellent. Did sir have anything particular in mind?
Yes, I want something...
Sporty?
No.
Dynamic?
No. I want something...
Rugged?
No. Frumpy.
Ah. Well, in that case, what about this? The Toyota Yaris Miranda Hart Edition?
No, not for me.
I see. There's always this, the Vauxhall Corsa Repeat of Loose Women from 4 years ago on the Living Channel edition.
Oh, dear me, no.
I see. Well, if it's frumpy you want, sir, I think this might be right up your street. It's the Suzuki Liana Women's Institute.
Oh, yes, very starchy.
All the trim is by Laura Ashley.
Nice.
And it comes with a free pot of lemon curd in the glove box.
Oh, racy. I'll take it.
Excellent. And how will sir be paying for this vehicle?
Luncheon vouchers.
Gareth Jones on speed.
Whenever we do one of these "What have you been driving" programmes, quite often Richard and I have been lucky enough to drive a range of things, but Zog's been spending more time driving the thing that you drive almost all the time, your lovely, what is it?
87
Porsche 944 Turbo S1, do we call it?
No.
The 952?
It's a 952. The 951 was the model designation for the left-hand drive 944 Turbo. 952 is the right-hand drive turbo. So if you want to get really fussy, it's a 952.
Which if there was a charge on this car, it would have cost you a bloody fortune, because you spent hours and hours and weeks. If we were charging for your man hours, you spend a fortune on that car, don't you?
Recently, I've spent a fair bit of time fixing the brakes after I had that little minor brake failure incident, and then recently just been doing some preventive maintenance. I've been spending quite a long time on it, and it's because it would have been, to be honest, such expensive work to get done if I'd had the garage do it. Yeah. I didn't.
What have you been doing?
I kind of like doing the stuff myself.
What have you been doing?
Timing belt, balance belt, water pump, replacing all of those, and also replacing a couple of gaskets on the camshaft housing, basically the main camshaft housing gasket, and then another gasket at the rear. That's what I've been doing.
On the street, outside your house?
Blimey, it was a hell of a job. And definitely the most involved, complicated, daunting bit of car fix-it DIY I've tackled so far. Apparently, experienced mechanics and garage, could probably do the whole job in, 8 hours or something. It probably took me 10 days.
I'm glad you're not charging London garage rates. What are London garage rates?
50 quid an hour. First of all, there's the taking it apart.
So what is your guide for all this? Have you got a manual, or are you looking this up on the internet?
Well, there's a couple of very useful sources. There's no, I'm not definitely not winging it. Definitely not winging it. I've downloaded all of the original factory workshop manuals, which describe how to do a lot of stuff. But actually, even more useful than that is a website called Clark's Garage, which is a sort of 944 resource, which, you want to look up how to replace the steering rack, how to replace your water pump, how to set the engine to top dead centre, how to do any sort of service stuff. It's there, described really well and with some really good notes. And then on top of that, there are forums, there are user groups. The Renlist forums are very helpful. I was a bit nervous about tackling this whole thing in the first place because the timing belt in particular is pretty important. And you need to get
that wrong when you eat your engine.
Exactly. And I'd heard a lot of sort of horror stories about getting the tension on the timing belt right. Actually, when you get down to it, it isn't as bad as all that. But when you're taking apart bits on a 25-year-old car, and you haven't done it before in particular, you're inevitably going to come across a few little humps along the way. And,
what was the most difficult?
The biggest one was in a slightly unexpected place, in that after I'd finally got everything taken apart from getting the water pump off. And at this point, I thought, OK, this is the last trick. As soon as I got this off, I can just put it all back together again, no problem. I snapped a couple of the rusted bolts that were holding the water pump in, which then meant that I had the remains of two bolts stuck in holes in the engine block. The problem being that because of the location, they're facing forwards in a space in between the engine block and the radiator, which isn't as big as you'd like it to be, so there's not much room to work.
Can't drill them out then?
Well, exactly. Long story short, I managed to get one of them out mechanically by kind of double nutting it, well, triple nutting it in fact, and sort of being able to get it out that way. The second one, all I managed to do was to snap it off closer to the engine block in doing that, and I only had a few millimetres. There was just enough room to get a drill in there, so I kind of drilled part of it out, hoping to get an extractor in there and then get it out. But I couldn't get it out with an extractor because there was so much stuff around the thing that there wasn't enough room to move the kind of double-ended handle that you stick onto the extractor in order to screw it out. So I couldn't even do that. And then I thought, there's got to be another approach to this. I'm going to take a chemical approach to this. And I used nitric acid, dilute nitric acid, to dissolve the remains of the steel bolt and the iron oxide that was with it.
You used Twitter to get that bolt out.
Twitter was a valuable resource.
Better than Swarfeger.
I had an idea that...
hang on, don't bring Swarfeger into this. Nothing's better than Swarfeger.
It is good, that's a fair point.
The smell of Swarfeger.
I had an idea that there should be some acid that would probably work on this, but I threw the question out to Twitter, as you say. So I had some very helpful feedback from a bunch of people. Bottom line, dilute nitric acid is the best stuff.
Which you got from where?
I've got it from Growell Hydroponic Supplies.
Really?
In Fulham.
Really? What else are people doing with it?
They're changing the pH of their hydroponic growing solutions.
Interesting.
Yeah.
I see.
Yeah. You see, basically these hydroponic places, as well as all the nutrients and stuff, they also sell stuff to make your solutions more alkaline and stuff to make your solutions more acidic. And it turns out that if you want to get hold of nitric acid at the weekend, which I did because I didn't want to hang about, hydroponic places are probably your best bet.
Hydroponics is basically growing drugs, isn't it?
It's
growing drugs
the
in
main
fluids.
application, probably.
But they pretend it's about growing.
Well, you can
a spider.
You growing plants.
You can grow other stuff, and people do grow a lot of other stuff. But
they sell
there's a lot of high-grade domestic marijuana cultivation using hydroponics. Yeah, but nitric acid.
Twitter
so the thing is, so I got some useful advice from Twitter and decided that nitric acid was the way to go. And it did a great job of dissolving the remains of the steel bolt and the iron oxide that was in there. I had these remains rusted in there. I made a little sort of cup thing and sort of glued it onto the side.
What didn't it dissolve?
It didn't dissolve the aluminium engine block, which is the critical thing. Because if you had a steel bolt in a steel block, nitric acid wouldn't be so much use. But if you've got an aluminium block and a steel bolt in it, you can use nitric acid to get it out.
Doesn't dissolve aluminium.
Strictly speaking, yes, it does dissolve aluminium because
but it goes for steel
aluminium is a more reactive metal than steel. If you think about the thermite reaction, that happens because aluminium is a very reactive metal.
Right.
But when you expose aluminium to air, or when you expose aluminium to an acid, it forms a layer of aluminium oxide, and aluminium oxide is
the fuel
is very resistant.
Space shuttle in the solid rocket boosters.
Don't think it is. Aluminium powder, maybe. Aluminium oxide is not.
Okay. Aluminium.
Can I ask a dumb question? Because I'm not very good with this stuff. Aluminium and steel are not best of friends, and they react against each other and cause each other to corrode, do they not?
If they're in contact by a
galvanic reaction,
tailgates
have to have a sort of strip that would protect the alley body from touching the steel chassis. Otherwise, over time, there would be a reaction which would cause corrosion. Why is that not happening in your engine block? And also, another dumb question.
That's a very...
Expansion rates. As the engine block gets hot... which expands to a greater degree under a given temperature, aluminium or steel?
I don't know the answer to either of those questions, and I'm going to go and find out. I'm going to find out about the thermal expansion. And
I wasn't trying to catch you out, though. No, I'm genuinely quite thick when it comes to science.
This is really interesting. But just to get back to the reaction thing, the aluminium oxide protects the aluminium from further attack. Although, if the aluminium oxide wasn't there, the aluminium would react very quickly and quite violently, more violently than the steel. But because the aluminium oxide is really unreactive, and it's impervious, it forms a nice protective layer. So that in practice, aluminium in big lumps is very unreactive. Get aluminium as a powder, and it can be very reactive.
Right, that's the inside of the SRBs.
And the thermite reaction.
That painted the outside of the Hindenburg, which is why the Hindenburg burned and not exploded, as it were.
I believe that to be the case. So this nitric acid trick got the remains of the bolt out, and having done that, it was, relatively speaking, an absolute breeze to put the whole thing back together again. And you know what? After 8 days of being taken apart and being messed about with, engine fired up first time.
So does that mean that the House of Zog is now an official Porsche-sanctioned maintenance garage? What's the term?
I don't know.
Porsche, OPC, official Porsche Centre, I don't know.
OPC, official Porsche Centre. Yeah, you'd have to ask Porsche about that. I'm certainly sanctioning myself as a certified Porsche bodger.
Well done, mate. Well done. Porsche bodger. Yeah. And on that note, he was Zog.
Goodbye.
He drives a Porsche. He was Richard.
Goodbye.
He drives a Suzuki and Hammer drove a biker. So I'm Gareth, and I drove a Mercedes-Benz B200. See ya.
To send us an email, see pictures, get song lyrics, join our Facebook fan site or follow us on Twitter, go to garethjones.tv. Gareth Jones on Speed is made in London by Whizbang.
Gareth Jones on Speed!
Lunch adventures.